Clomp, clomp, clomp went Peter's clompins. Any idea what those are? Wooden shoes. As he hurried along the narrow street in the tiny village of Holland. It was cold, and Peter hurried as fast as his pair of 10-year-old legs could travel. He wanted to stop and visit his grandmother and grandfather before he went home. Peter's blond hair stood out straight, blown from under his woolen cap by the wind. The warm scarf around his neck seemed to be following him, held out by the howling gusts. Peter waved to a friend who was watching from a windmill close by. It must be fun, Peter thought, living in a round windmill house. I could start in the kitchen, run in a circle, and soon I'd be right back in the kitchen again. Peter stopped in front of the bakery of Hans the baker. He pressed his cold nose against the even colder window pane. It will soon be St. Nicholas Day, he thought. When I put my clompins out for St. Nicholas to fill, I hope he will put one of those big, big cookies beside them. Or perhaps he will bring me one of those cookies made to look like himself. Or perhaps, just perhaps, he will bring me one of each. I must be sure to be very, very good. St. Nicholas Day will soon be here. Peter began counting the days until December 5th, which would be St. Nicholas Day. He had to count all of his fingers twice. Peter wondered about St. Nicholas. How does he manage to travel so far and so fast in one night? Don't his feet get tangled in his long red cape and long white robe as he rides his white horse? St. Nicholas must get cold riding all night long. Does that long white hair flowing from under his high pointed cap keep him warm? Peter wondered. Surely his beard must be a help, at least. When Peter came to the kirk, or church, with its tall steeple, he began to think of Christmas Day. Just 20 days after St. Nicholas Day would be Christmas Day. For many hundreds of years, the church had stood beside the canal, and every Christmas Day, all the people of the tiny village went there to hear the minister preach a Christmas sermon. Peter had heard the Christmas lesson many times, but somehow Christmas Day did not seem nearly as important to him as St. Nicholas Day. December 25th is Christmas Day over there, and St. Nicholas Day is celebrated on December 5th. Oh, he liked to hear the Christmas music. He liked to go visiting for 2 days, and surely he liked the good food he always got when he went visiting. But to Peter, St. Nicholas seemed more important because that was the day he got presents. Peter knew that Christmas was the celebration of the birth of Jesus, but he had never been told that the Lord Jesus had been born in order to die, so that he, Peter, might be saved from sin and its wages, death. So the service in the church was of little interest to Peter, for he had never been born again. Peter turned away from the church when he heard voices and saw people of the village gathering in front of the town hall. This meant that the mayor was going to speak. He represented Holland's queen. When he spoke, all listened. Peter hurried as fast as he could and got to the town hall just as the mayor stepped outside and began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor said, standing straight and tall in his long coat, "I have to tell you that our calendar has been changed. Many countries in Europe have already changed their calendars. We did not want to do it, but now we must. And so," the mayor paused a moment, "this year, our new year, will start on December 21st. Only we shall call it January. We'll lose 10 days, but for this year only. Then we shall go on as always. This is necessary so our calendar will be right next year." Peter stood silently, counting on his fingers again. So did many of the older people who listened. Then one of the older Dutch women said, "But if this be so, we cannot have Christmas Day this year." Another exclaimed, Yeah, this is so. We cannot have Christmas Day this year." Then everyone began talking at once. "We cannot have Christmas Day this year. We cannot go to the church and hear the big organ play Christmas songs. And we cannot sing our Christmas songs and hear the preacher preach and read from the Bible. We cannot visit our relatives and friends on Christmas Day because there will be no Christmas Day." What of it? Peter asked. We'll still have St. Nicholas Day. Having counted on his fingers, Peter was certain this was so. One woman turned to Peter. You greedy boy, she exclaimed, you look only for presents. Don't you care about celebrating when Jesus Christ was born? Peter rubbed his mittens up and down his wide pants and hung his head. St. Nicholas Day is more important, he muttered, and started down the street to his grandmother's house. He must tell her the news right away. Clomp, clomp, clomp went the clompins down the narrow street. Peter clomped over the little bridge which crossed the canal in front of grandmother's house. He stopped long enough to look down. I think the ice is thick enough for skating, he thought. Tomorrow I'll find out. Walking to the back of the house, Peter looked up at the carved gargoyles above the narrow windows. Hi there, he shouted. You make funny faces at me. I make funny faces at you, see? Peter twisted his face out of shape, trying to make it as ugly as those carved out of wood. Peter knew they had been put there long ago because the Hollanders thought they could ward off evil spirits. He was glad his grandfather and grandmother did not believe this now. Inside the little shed which separated the house from the barn, Peter took off his warm jacket and cap and hung them on hooks. Slipping out of his clompins, he sat there neatly under his jacket and cap and shivering, went inside the warm kitchen, walking in his thick woolen socks. He knew he would find his grandparents sitting beside the fireplace. Grandmother smiled when she saw Peter, blue eyes shining and cheeks all rosy red from the cold. Grandmother's smile added a few more happy wrinkles to her lovely face. Peter put a light kiss on her cheek and excitedly began telling her the big news. But grandmother interrupted him. Pointing to a corner of the kitchen, she said, Shh, your grandfather's taking his nap. And sure enough, grandfather was sitting there in his favorite rocking chair with a big handkerchief spread out over his face. He was indeed asleep, as his snoring told Peter. Speaking softly, grandmother said, I know why you have come, Peter. You want to eat my little cakes and hear my stories. Nay, nay, Peter exclaimed, not this time, grandmother. I have important news for you. Peter told her what the whole town was now talking about. There would be no Christmas this year.